All right, well, there we go. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Definitely getting closer to Christmas. I know it's more of a challenge for people to, make it out to these kinds of community events. So definitely appreciate all of you who are able to make it out. Excited to talk to all of you about Stupendous date tricks, basically things we can do to manage complex content relationships in Drupal in ways that hopefully make it easy for your kind of admins and editors and site users in terms of their ability to manage those different kinds of content. My name is Martin Anderson-Clutz on Drupal.org and various social platforms. I go by ManClue. I am a solutions engineer at Acquia, and I've done a variety of different certification, fair bit around Drupal, and also with the Nielsen Norman Group for usability. So the demo site that we're going to be looking at today is pretty stock. There's a few pieces or a few modules that I installed, Gin admin theme, Path Auto, a couple of things that are pretty common that I haven't listed here, but sort of the main actors that we're going to be playing around with configuration and so on are the ones you see listed here. So Smart Date as kind of the main module in terms of managing, particularly sort of the date widget, and then things like recurring dates. Smart Date Calendar Kit, really optional. You don't necessarily have to use it, but as we'll see when we get into the demo, it makes kind of a nice starting point in terms of getting you up and running and providing some nice additional features that can be tricky to configure yourself. Date Augmenter Api is sort of a plugin system that you can use to really allow your site to assemble the different kinds of date formatting features that it might need. Date Content Augmenter as a module that really provides a way for you to have fieldable content entities that you can attach to specific instances of recurring dates or even just multi-valued dates. Add to Calendar Date Augmenter as something that can provide add to calendar links that aren't dependent on any kind of a third-party sort of, JavaScript library or third-party service, in addition to being sort of composable in the sense that you can combine, add to calendar or date content or some of these other pieces, whereas traditionally the add to calendar solutions in Drupal are really a discrete formatter, which means you have to choose between having add to calendar links or any other feature that you might want around date formatting. And so the idea being that you can put some of these pieces together to sort of create the end user experience that you want. And we'll definitely have a look at that. Inline entity form actually on this list is the only one that I have no part in maintaining. But as we'll see, it can really play a powerful role in terms of making the experience easy for your kind of editors and site administrators. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into the first of the use cases that I kind of prepared to show or to share with all of you. So we're actually going to be looking at setting up a piece of content that's actually going to map to the San Francisco Drupal users group. So we're going to set it up to repeat on the second Thursday of each month. We're going to set and display the time zone. And then for each of the meetups, we're going to have it show the topic, the presenters, and a meetup link. So that being said, let's have a look at the site we're using. So it really is a fresh Drupal 9 install. It has some of those modules that we talked about, but if we go up here and look at the content types, it's really got the two basic ones and the event that was provided through the Smart Date Calendar Kit. So let's go ahead and create our event. So we can call this the San Francisco Dev Meetup. But actually, before we get too far, let's notice that this is sort of the standard Smart Date widget. It's really built and designed to be like the kind of date creation widget that your editors would be used to in using something like Google Calendar or, Outlook, Apple Calendar, those kinds of things. But it doesn't at this point have any ability for recurring dates or to add a time zone. So let's go ahead and fix that. First thing we need to do is to enable the module for recurring dates. Okay, so we do actually have that. So then we just need to go in to our content type, event, and our fields. And if we go into here, just need to toggle that to allow recurring dates. In this case, maybe 6 months out is enough for it to generate for us. The rest of that is probably good. And then in terms of the form widget, let's change that from the inline range to one that's going to give us the time zone. If we wanted to, we could set it to only allow specific time zones. So we could say, you know, if it's a site that's really focused on North America, to maybe just have even like American time zones or Canadian ones, depending on who the site is targeted towards. But in this case, let's just leave that as it is and go ahead and get that saved. Now, if we refresh the page, we see that we have the option to set this to recur monthly. And we can even say, let's get it to recur on the second Thursday of every month. Let's go ahead and get the title set again. And let's say that it's going to be for the Los Angeles time zone, set to start at 5:30, go for 2 hours. And let's just leave that as indefinitely recurring. So that's saved now. You can see that it's created those. It's giving us the time, or the time based on the time zone that we set. And then because this site has actually been configured for Eastern time, it's actually converting that there, but it's a bit confusing because it's actually not showing the time zone string. So let's go ahead and let's create a new smart date time format that's going to explicitly show that. So if we go here and go those, let's give this a label there of time zone, just so that we know it's the one that we just created. And if we go back to our configuration for our links, and let's go to the display. And let me update this. Oh, actually, what we should do. Oh, no, that was the other thing. So let's go here. Oh, change this from the default formatter to the time zone one we just created. When we refresh this now, we can see it's explicitly showing that this is the time in Pacific and this is the time in Eastern. So we've got the first couple parts of this, but now we need to be able to set the content for each of those dates to be able to assign the topic, the presenter, and the meetup link. So let's go back to our view configuration and see that on fields. We have these options to enable these date augmenters. And as we talked about before, the date augmenters is really a plugin system. We've got a couple of modules that provide these plugins. So add to calendar links, which we're not going to use right now, and the content one, which is actually what we want. So we go in here. So date content actually allows you to create, it's basically the equivalent of content types, except they're content that are meant to be directly attached to date instances. So could be instances in a recurring date or a multi-valued. Theoretically, you could also use them with a single value, but they probably provide not as much value there. We're going to be adding some more of these. So for now, let's just specifically set this to session. And you can either have the interface where you create the content that's going to be attached to that date instance as a completely separate page, which is the default. But for myself, I really like to use the off-screen tray, the settings tray, because I feel like it keeps the editor sort of in context of what they're working on. So let's save that, and then we can see what that looks like. So you can see now that we have links to add some of these. Actually, one change that I want to make here is let's backdate this to the 1st of November, just so that we have something in the past. And let's go ahead. Now we can see here that we've got the topic and the speaker, but we don't have the fields necessary for adding that link that we've said we want. So if we go to our date content types and to session, let's go ahead and manage the fields for that. So just go add field, same way we would add a field to a content type. And let's add a link field. Just call it link. Just one is fine. We can leave it optional. really we can just go with the default configuration for what we need right now. Now, if we refresh this page, go to add session content, now we really have everything we need. So we can say, Stupendous Datrix, you know who I am. Let me grab the URL for this. Paste it in there. And say we want the link text to be register on Meetup. And now when we save that, we can see that it updates. We've got all of this information there. Maybe we want to tweak the output a little bit. So let's go in here. Again, same way we would for a content type. In this case, maybe we don't really need to have any kind of a label, assuming that the link is self-evident. The other two are fine in line. So let's save that. And there we go. So now we've got our sequence of dates for the SFDUG meetup. And we could go through, if we wanted to, one by one. You know, we could add the one that we just heard about for January, which sounds great. We could add those one by one or over time, you know, as the sort of, you know, topic and speakers get confirmed. So hopefully that gives you a sense of how sort of quickly and easily we can get this particular site configured to solve this kind of a use case of a recurring event, but having individual content on each of the instances. So before I move on from this particular use case, are there any sort of questions, comments, thoughts about this particular scenario that we've talked about? That sounds like we're good. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about our next use case, which is really around having weekly concerts. So maybe imagine it's, you know, like a coffee house, something like that, and they're having people come in to play some acoustic music in the afternoon. So for each concert, we're going to show an artist, and for that artist, we're going to show an image and a short bio. We're going to have a description for the actual concert, as well as add to calendar links. And the concerts themselves are going to repeat on Tuesday and Friday of every week. So let's go ahead, go back to our site here. Let's create a new content type. Let's call it performance. One of my pet peeves is that Drupal always assumes that you want to show the author and date information, which I almost never want to do. Same thing with main navigation. I feel like it's pretty rare that I actually want that for new content types. So if anybody knows of a module that'll allow me to set those sort of global preferences on my own, would love to be able to do that. I oftentimes want to rename the body. We'll do that with some other things, but for now, we'll leave that's fine, because we're actually not going to use that so much for the demo. What we really need to do is to add our date field here. Let's say that it's going to allow recurring values. Because it's weekly, let's maybe set it to 3 months out to generate. Set our default value to next hour, and then let's go ahead and save that. So now, actually, we can close that one. Close up some more extra tabs that we don't need. We could go ahead and see where we're at already for the performance. So let's say after acoustic, let's say it's going to happen. We'll say that we'll backdate it to last week. We'll say it's 1 p.m. for 90 minutes, repeating weekly. And we can say, let's do that Tuesday and Friday. And save that. It's definitely generating those dates that we want. So Tuesday and Friday, 1 to 2:30. But this list is probably not the best way for it to show that to our users. So let's start to tweak this a little bit. So we can go in and instead of using the standard smart date formatter, let's use the recurring formatter that really is designed to allow us to show just a subset centered around the current date. And so we can go in here and say, maybe we want to show, it's fine to show the 2 most recent. Let's show maybe the 3 upcoming. And let's show the next instance separately. And let's just go back here. So we wanted to show some of this other information. Let's save that for now. So if we look at our node that we've created, right away we can see it's a much better presentation for a typical user, right? So it's showing the next instance of the state sort of more prominently, as well as giving them understanding of when they could expect to catch the afternoon acoustic concerts. It's giving us a list of some of the recent ones and the ones that are further out. But we know that we want to associate artists. And for the sake of this use case, let's assume that, the place hosting these concerts is probably going to have artists come back more than once. So we probably want to save those as their own content type so that they can be more easily reused. And also you could have, like, let's say a long format bio that somebody who's interested, maybe they happen to catch part of that concert and we're interested in learning more about the artist, they could read about them in detail. So let's go ahead and make that its own content type. So let's call it artist. I'm going to go through this dance again. Go. And so in this case, let's just leave the body field, but we're going to relabel as bio. And then we're going to add a field. We're going to actually use the existing core image field that was created. For the sake of simplicity, in a more sophisticated site, you might want to use the, media entities, those kinds of things. But for now, that's fine. Let's just leave the defaults for now. And then let's look at a couple of other pieces around the overall setup. So let's suppose that on the node display, we don't really want to have any kind of a label on the image. We're going to show it above the bio to make that look a little better. And while we're here, let's also think about the teaser view. We probably do want to have the image in the teaser, again, without a label. But this time, let's just use the thumbnail and save that. And the bio, let's say we want to keep that nice and short because we're going to potentially be using a lot of these. Let's save that as 300 characters. So the next piece is, in the same way that we had the sessions that we associated with our events, we really want to have a new content type that we can use to associate artists to those events, as well as to attach the description for the actual concert itself. So let's go ahead and create a new one. We're going to call this gig. And after that's created, let's go ahead and start adding a couple of fields. So the first one we're going to add is entity reference to the artists that we just created the content type for. So let's call this presented by, or actually maybe let's call it performed by. It's maybe a better way to put it. Performed by. And then let's set it to unlimited. Probably typically it will be 1, but maybe there will be times where we'll have more of an open mic night or something like that, where we want to have a variety. So let's just leave it unlimited. We can leave it as optional for now, but let's make sure we set it to artist. And that's probably good there. In terms of the form display, here's where we're going to start to make some use out of the inline entity form, because by default, it's going to use an autocomplete, which means if your editor needs to associate an artist to a concert that they're setting up, they would have to sort of either create that or potentially, which is a terrible user experience, get partway through, setting up the information for that concert, realize that the artist wasn't in the system, and then have to sort of like abandon their work, go create the artist, come back, and all that. Whereas inline entity form really provides a nice experience in terms of being able to create that information in line. So let's say they can add new nodes. We'll let them add existing nodes, we're also going to override the labels here. So let's say singular is artist and plural is artists. Then we save that. And let's just go back to the fields. Oh, the other field that we wanted was a description. So let's go ahead and format a text field. Just one is fine for these. Leave it as optional. That should be good. So let's just look at a couple of things in terms of how this is going to be presented. So performed by, we do want a label. Let's leave that for now. Description, maybe we can hide the label on that. Let's maybe have the description first. And let's go ahead now. Okay, this, okay, it's not updating. That's because we need to go back to our performance content type, display, and start to do a little bit more configuration to sort of tie some of these pieces together. So let's go ahead and say for the individual dates, we want to associate our content and our add to calendar links. We probably want to have the content show first before the links. So let's switch the order there. And then we could customize the label in terms of what's going to be shown before the links, but let's just leave that for now. And then for the content, what we wanted was the gig. And again, well, let's use the off-screen tray. Save that. And then we go back to our content. We can see we have all of those links there now, as well as the add to calendar links. Notice that by default, it doesn't add those to past events. Again, you know, when you're thinking about when it's useful, use add to calendar links for something in the past, it's probably not that useful. So there's, you know, some of that logic in there, you know, meant to sort of keep it more helpful. So if we went to add some gig content in here, we can see it comes up where we can add a new artist, we can add an existing. So this would use an autocomplete. We'll talk a little later about Entity Browser as a way to potentially make that experience a little bit more intuitive. But when we go to create an artist, we can see there's a lot of fields in here that, for the most part, we're probably okay if it just uses its defaults. So how can we clean this up and make it a better experience for editors? Well, lots of us use view modes for content, but Drupal core actually supports a similar mechanism for the form modes, but they tend to be used quite a bit less. But inline entity form actually has support for form modes. So let's go ahead and set one up that we can use to clean this up. So let's go ahead here and say display modes, form modes, and add a new one. And if we say content, let's call this packed. And then if we go to our content type for artists, let's say form display, the bottom, in the same way that you may have created a custom view mode for a content type, we can do the same thing for a form mode. So let's create that, go to compact. Now, theoretically, we could have just taken the default form and taken all of those fields out. The nice thing about doing it this way is you can still have all of these options available to an editor, but just say for the sake of editing one or adding an artist while you're in the process of putting in some concert information, you probably don't care about a lot of these other things. But if you really did want to, you know, tweak or adjust any of these settings, you still have the option by going into kind of the node edit form directly and having those options. But we're going to have a more condensed version that's specifically useful for when, you know, again, we're doing that kind of more in the context of a different task, right? So let's go ahead and move a few of these down into the disabled section. So down. So really keeping it as simple as possible. Now that that's saved, let's go back to our gig form display, to our inline entity form configuration. All we have to do is choose that form mode that we've just created, get that saved. And now if we refresh our page, go ahead and do content type and add a new artist, we can see how much cleaner that looks. So we can say, let's just throw a little bit of information here. Got some content we can sort of throw in there. Let's grab an image that I downloaded before. So obviously, we want to give it alternative text. And now we can create the artist, and you can see that's all set up for us. We could add additional ones if we needed to, but in this case, let's just go ahead and drop in a short description. You can see that spell check knows that I'm Canadian and wants me to put the U, but because we're talking to an American audience, we'll just leave it as is. So you can see now in here, we've got our date, we've got the description and information on the artist, but it's just giving us the label. So, which is not terrible. So, we could click through and see, the bio in full here, but really what we said we wanted to do was to show, a little bit more information on the actual piece of content. So let's go to our gig content type and manage the display. And where we're showing the performer, let's make that a rendered entity and use the teaser view. Update that. Let's close that tab and refresh. And now you can see we've got headshots, we've got the short version of the bio, in addition to all of those other elements. And we could easily go through and do that for some of the other pieces, but hopefully that gives you a good sense of just how easy that was to kind of set up. Really, this is just sort of default formatting that you get out of the box with Olivero. We'd probably want to tweak, spacing and some of those other things, but hopefully that gives you enough of a sense. A lot of these pieces, for example, the recurring formatter really uses a twig template. So if you didn't want these to be details elements, or you wanted to change the order of these things, you can easily, in your site theme, override the twig template and tweak that to be exactly the structure and order and all of those good things that you need. Any questions around this particular piece of, some of the things that we've seen, attaching content, add to calendar links, any of those things?
No, it's all pretty clear.
Okay, awesome. All right, so that's this one pretty much done. Let's go on to our third use case, which is imagining that we need to set a daily stand-up. So, got a project, we want to get the team together, talk about what we're working on, anything that we're blocked on, any places we could use help, all of those good things. So kind of a very standard part of your agile methodology. So it's going to repeat Monday to Friday. We want to have an add to calendar link on the series, but not the individual dates. We want the ability to add Scrum Notes. So, as the Scrum Master, I want to jot down everything that I've heard and make sure that, anybody who couldn't make the meeting can get caught up easily. And we want to show the series rule, the next occurrence, and the 3 most recent. So let's go ahead and actually make, let's do this. Close up again a few of our tabs, because I am notorious for having too many open at once. And let's go ahead and create another content type for our meetings. So again, we're going to do this little dance. We'll leave the body here again, just sort of a general purpose description field. We could change the title, but I don't think for this demo it's going to make too much of a difference. Let's go ahead and add our date field. We're going to make a recurring date value. In this case, since we're generating even more instances every week, maybe we only want to go at 2 months in terms of how far out it's going to generate those. And the other piece that we want to customize here, most scrums, I feel like, are going to be just 15 minutes at most. So let's add that value. We could add different increments if we really needed to, but that's probably good. So the other piece is we know that we want to attach notes. So let's go ahead and also create a new date content type. And so let's just call this notes. And then we should add text field, a WYSIWYG, where we can just drop in or record any notes. So let's add a new field. Let's call this text. Just one is fine. And it may as well be required since there's not much point of attaching notes if you're not going to put in any text. So now we can go back to the meeting content type, and let's make sure we get that tied in here. So again, we're going to use the recurring formatter. Let's see here. So we wanted to say the 3 most recent. Let's use the one upcoming. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add the content on the individual dates to say we want to be able to attach notes. Maybe to give you a sense of what that looks like, we're going to, in this case, leave it as the default so you can see how that experience is different. And then on the rule itself is where now we want to have the add to calendar link. And let's say, just to mix it up, let's say add series to calendar so that you can see how easy it is to customize that. Now you could also put tokens in here. So if you wanted to have a different title, if you want to have this populate a location, let's say a Zoom link, have some kind of a description, again, using tokens. Those are all things that are easy to do and configure. There is also an option. So what we saw before is just a default list of links, but there is also an option for a modal dialog if you wanted to sort of clean that up a little bit. So let's have a look at that. And yeah, let's move that ahead of the body. So save that. And now let's go ahead and create our meeting. So let's call this project stand up. And let's say that this is going to happen. Again, we'll backdate it to here. We'll say this is going to happen every day at 10 a.m. for 15 minutes. We'll say it happens daily, but only during the week. And when we save that, we can see that we have the option to add notes on all of our individual dates and the option to add the series to the calendar. So when we click that, it opens up this modal. Again, you have the flexibility to, use a custom twig template. There's a small JavaScript library that drives a lot of this functionality, but you could override that in your theme as well if you wanted to work in this in kind of a different way. We can point and click, or we can use the keyboard to tab over. And in this case, we're going to try out opening this up in iCal. So if I double click this to open it, it's going to give us the option of which calendar. And if we say yes, we can see now that we have it showing in our calendar every day of the week. We'll just turn the weekdays. And it's brought through the title of the node and all of that information. Again, if we had populated these other fields, for example, using tokens or even just hard-coded values, for example, if we were putting in, let's say, a Zoom link for the location, all of that would be in here as well. In this case, because I don't actually want this in my calendar, I'm going to delete that, but I have the choice to delete only the event, delete all. that gives you a sense of how that piece works as well. Any questions around sort of this meeting piece and using different augmenters for the series versus the dates, or anything we've seen so far?
I guess I have a quick one. What if you had a meeting on where there was no work, like you wanted to exclude something?
Great question. So it's actually a good lead in to what I wanted to talk about next, which is how these show up in our views. So the Smart Date Calendar Kit actually creates some views out of the box for us, which we can go ahead and have a look at. So out of the box, it's only including that event content type. And so only that one node is showing right now, but we could go ahead and update our view. So let's go ahead and say meeting performance. If we save that, now we'll see these. It's not showing any of the data information because we really haven't bothered to configure the teaser view, which is what it's using right now. If anybody's interested, we could definitely walk through that process of configuring the teasers and maybe some of the nuances there. But it's pretty similar to what we've already done for the node display. So let's go ahead and move on to the calendar, which I think is a good place to talk about some of that specific question. So in here in our calendar view, this is using the full calendar view module that we were talking about actually a little bit before the session. Again, it's only showing that one monthly event right now because that's the only one that's the event content type. But if we update the content types here, let's save that. Now we can see all of our different content listed in here. If we were to say, as an example, in December, maybe on the 31st, we don't want to have this afternoon meeting. Let's move that over to here. Then it's as simple as a drag and drop. Potentially, we could even change the time within the date. Or we could say, because this is close to the end of the year, maybe we're going to do an abbreviated format. So very easy to drag and drop, all those good things. The other thing too, so I guess sort of to more directly speak to that question, actually, it might be easier to see if I go back to here. Let's reload this so we're back in the monthly view. It's not refreshing. Oh, it is. I just can't see it. Let's reload this. Oh. The joys of a live demo. All right. Let's see here. I'm going to try. So what I'm going to do here is try. CR. See if that helps us. All right, so let's go back here. All right, looks like we're rocking and rolling. So let's just go to our content. Let's look at our meetup here and have a look. So let's suppose that, to your point, maybe the February instance, we had a speaker lined up, they canceled, or something as significant as the same day, and we just decide, okay, well, we're just going to cancel it. So we could go in here to edit. We can say manage instances. We can go to that February date. We can override it if we just want to reschedule it. It's let's say, more manual way of sort of dragging and dropping inside the calendar that we saw already, or we can just say remove instance. And then we do that. It shows strike through, which means that close this and save. You can see that now there's no February instance showing in there. So does that answer your question?
Yes, that does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, no problem. Any other questions around, sort of the calendar / views type piece? Seems
Hey,
like,
Martin, not a question, but maybe a good time to point out that you can, in addition to dragging and dropping and resizing, you can also color your content types. So if you're combining events from different content types, like you did, you can set a color for each of them so that it's very clear which ones are which. And we've been able to extend that to also taxonomies as well as by user who added the event. Just because everyone needs their own color scheme. So lots of options now to add some color to your event.
so my computer is telling me it's had a long day, and it.
Yeah, what happened? It wants to
I
install
don't know.
Drupal.
I have to say, I started using Lando about 6 months ago, and I do find that it's a lot more prone to
It crashed.
sort of giving up on me than I used to use more of a local solution. So if I have some time over the holidays, I may try and move back more to, seems to be the events calendar, which is interesting. Let me just try and go back to events. Yeah. I don't know if it's, it could even be in my browser. So let's see here.
Mm.
Let me go into the views directly and see if that'll, at least we can show the option even if, so the events calendar, I go into here and in the settings.
Yeah, in the settings. Yeah.
So let's see here. So we can go colors for bundle types, and then we could say, we can have our meetings in like
A boring
orange,
orange.
and we could have our events in a
Nice.
purple. Save that. I can't guarantee at this point that the we're going to be able to get the calendar show with these pretty colors, but anyway, that gives you a sense of the interface, and hopefully you have a Drupal server that's more reliable than my laptop. So let's save that and see if it'll let us. Nope. So anyway, maybe we can post a screenshot or something of that if somebody's really interested in seeing it, but it's, the same as what you saw before, but more colorful. So not exactly sure why this is being flaky. I've literally done, lots of rehearsals of this today, and this is the first time I've run into that. So joys of a live demo. Any other sort of questions, comments, thoughts?
That was just very cool modules.
Thanks.
Martin, I guess one
Yeah, go ahead.
To that same extent, like it was great to see them removed. What if you wanted to add one to the instances through the same mechanism?
So I don't think there's really a mechanism to like add one. So actually, let's just go here. So as an example, let's go ahead and say, let me say this is our sprint retrospective. Let's say that it happens every 2 weeks, because we're using a 2-week cycle, and it's going to happen on Fridays at 2 p.m. So we can say that it ends after 5 times. So, okay, let's scan. comments. Right. For the sake of what we're talking about, let's just go ahead and have it list these out. Yeah, display. Just have it. Just use the standard formatter where it's going to list them. So we can see. So we've got 5 of these. I mean, in a way, you could just say like after 6. And then if you actually wanted, for some reason, an addition one in the middle, like let's say on the January 14th, then you could just go in and say manage instances, take this last one and override it, and then say, 1:14, save. It's actually in italics, which is sort of like the visual hint that it's been overridden. You have the option again to reschedule, restore default, or remove altogether. Let's go ahead and save that, and then you can see that it's put that in the middle there. So I feel like that's maybe not exactly what you're talking about, but you can sort of like achieve it. That's, I guess, kind of one way of potentially doing it. If it was sort of like monthly with no sort of like fixed end. So let's do that as, I guess there's one other way you could do it, which should say, whatever, staff meeting, and it's the, let's see, it repeats monthly on the first Monday. Let's call this terrible time for whole staff meeting. Let's do it 1 p.m. And so it's got a couple of those. If for whatever reason you want to have a new one in there, the other thing you can do is to, instead of make it like an extra instance in the recurring, you could just say, give us another one that's going to be 2021, 1:14. And because it's a separate range, by default, what it wants to do is display each of those as a range, but there's also within the formatter the option to go in here and say, force these to be chronological. That's another way to sort of like, something in the logic there is maybe, oh, it's because I did it for 2021, so that's not great. So let's change that. 2022. Save that. And so it's sort of put that in there. So there's a couple of different ways. Hopefully one of those would sort of, be an acceptable solution to that use case.
Yeah, that last one you just showed would actually be an acceptable one. So cool. And then that would follow the same mechanism as if you wanted to add content and everything, like you showed previously. Yeah.
So if in here, so we could say this is the meeting. So let's go ahead and content. Actually, maybe what I'll do here is just deselect these, which should show all of them, to give you the sense that maybe sometimes you have a piece or like a content type that you want to be flexible. So sometimes it's going to be a concert, and sometimes it's going to be a session, and sometimes it's going to be a meeting. You don't have to just pick one, and then it's really up to your editors to sort of pick which one is going to be most relevant. So for this one, they could, say this is a concert, and this one is a meeting, and this one is, something else. And then just to sort of show you, let's see the anonymous view of that, they don't see those links, right? They'll only see the actual content if an editor goes in and creates it. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? I mean, the other thing is, like, does anybody have something that they've run into that's like, yeah, I had this client that wanted to build this thing, and I'm like, there's no way you could do that in Drupal with dates, like happy to sort of talk through like what's a potential way to solve that.
You literally just solved that for me with smart dates. So
Awesome. All right, we're getting close to the hour, which is, what I was promised. I don't want to overshoot that, but happy to continue the discussion. Kind of the last thing I wanted to sort of touch on is like, what haven't we talked about so far? So we actually did get more into the weeds on full calendar view than I thought, which is awesome. Although we didn't actually get to see the pretty colors, but maybe we can try again once we wrap this up. The other use case I've heard people ask about is, instead of saying, I just want to schedule things at different times, the other use case is to say, I have like time slots that I want people to be able to like reserve or book into. And bookable calendar is really for that kind of a use case. So you think about like a doctor's office where they have certain slots through the day and people can get scheduled into that. But it's like you can never have like more than one person in a particular slot. So bookable calendar is meant to solve that. The recurring events module is quite good, especially if you're doing like registration on your website. But it doesn't, as far as at least the last time I talked to the author, doesn't do paid event registration. So I set this up. It's actually a sandbox module. But it's really just configuration. I will be honest or candid that I haven't actually had to use it in any kind of a production environment, but it was sort of a proof of concept of using Smart Date with Drupal Commerce to do paid event registration. Theoretically, you could use that for also free event registration. Just set the price to 0, and then you'd probably want to do some more massaging to sort of make that free registration not feel like a $0 commerce transaction. So, again, if it was free, this one would probably out of the box give you a better experience. But if you needed a blend of the two, you could probably also do that here. But again, with some extra work. And then the last piece we sort of touched on as we went through, we showed how you could use autocomplete. There may be cases where you want somebody to have more of like a browsing experience, looking at, thumbnails or those kinds of things to create that like entity reference as part of, some of those entity relationships that we talked about. And so entity browser can be really useful for those kinds of things. So again, if there's any other use cases that anybody wants to talk about, definitely happy to discuss that now. Or if, like tomorrow morning, you're sitting having your coffee and you think, oh yeah, I have this thing that, like 6 months ago, somebody asked me about, again, you reach out, Drupal Slack, Twitter, any of those good things. Definitely happy to keep this discussion moving forward.
all right.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you very much, Martin.
All right. Well, I'm glad you guys enjoyed it.
All right.
Yeah, thank you. Martin, I have to say, the functionality you've jammed into Smart Date is unbelievable. And I must admit, if I have a client that's looking at, there's still a few on Drupal 7, and now it's part of my demo. It's like, look what you could do if we can get you onto Drupal 9. You remember how you've been making dates? You could do this. And they'd be like, okay, can we schedule that into March, first 2 weeks of March? Can we, it's part of my, look what we could do, right? If we bring you over. So thank you. Like there's so many, it's even to the point now where I'm like, oh, there might actually be a formatter, because of course there's a formatter somewhere. I just don't know yet where it is, but there must be a way to do this. I'm almost at that point where, of course, he's thought about this. So I just got to find out where that might be hiding. No, thank you. It's been absolutely brilliant, I think so. And a lot of effort. I know how much effort that must have been.
Well, and to be honest, like even the full calendar views integration is like so much more than what it would have been if I was the person doing all of that work. There's actually a developer in Germany who was using Smart Date for a his own project. And so he started doing all of this amazing work. And so all of the drag and drop integration and, those kinds of things are really, a testament to his work. And there are really lots of other pieces of it that are really the community that helped to drive that forward. So, I definitely can't take all of that credit for it, for sure. One other thing that I'll mention, though, if some of you have been using core date fields and are thinking about using Smart Date, I'll say a couple of things. Number one, you can use Smart Date as the formatter for core date fields. So if you just want to use like the presentation type pieces, you won't get things like recurring events there, but you can still use those two together. But if you really want to actually migrate to a Smart Date field, there is actually a Drush script that'll do the conversion for you. So basically the process would be, you've got your core date field that has, your values in it. You add a Smart Date field, you run this Drush script that'll basically populate all of those values into the Smart Date field, and then you can just sort of like blow away the core date field. So, if somebody's wanting to migrate over, there's a path for that. So.
Fantastic. All right, I'm going to stop recording.